we're reimagining history without that institution at all, then
keep in mind, he's saying if we imagine a world where the transatlantic slave trade did not impact Africa,
and Africa itself would be in a better shape, better place, and better shape, and maybe indeed Black Americans would be better off there. But this seems highly unlikely, and it also
highly unlikely. Anyway, all right, cool. Let's get into the last topic, which is Matt Walsh defending slavery. So, always fun. You know, it's been a really long time since we covered Matt Walsh. I know it's been a while. Kind of, you know, you got to take a break every once in a while. But let's get into it. Let's go. Let's hear these strong arguments for abortion.
If you listened to the daily cancellation on Friday, then you already knew that this daily cancellation was coming. On Friday, we discussed the idea of reparations, in particular the plan proposed in California that would dole out $5 million apiece to Black residents as repayment for the enslavement that they never experienced and that nobody they've ever known or spoken to has experienced. During that segment, I expanded on a counterpoint to reparations that had been made by a Black college professor named Wilford Riley, which was a restatement.
Love that id poll. Also, let's. This is going to be easy.
Friday, we discussed the idea of reparations, in particular the plan proposed in California that would dole out $5 million.
I believe this is San Francisco.
Black residents as repayment for the enslavement
that
they never experienced and that nobody they've ever known or spoken to has experienced.
So, do you think? And you know, here's the big question for Matt Walsh. Do you think some people who now live in California maybe moved from states, from localities that suffered from deep discrimination, if not slavery? Could that be the answer? You know, just a thought. Also, if I remember correctly, what is this? It's like let me look it up really quickly because I actually don't know. San Francisco. I'm pretty sure it was San Francisco. What was it? Reparations. Is this it? San Francisco board open to reparations. Oh, so it hasn't passed? Stop it. I want to read really quickly. A draft reparations plan released in December is unmatched nationwide in its specificity and breadth. Cool. Payments of $5 million to every eligible Black adult, the elimination of personal debt and tax burdens, guaranteed annual income of at least $97,000 for 250 years, and homes in San Francisco for just $1 a family. These were some of the more than 100 recommendations. Wait, it's a recommendation? So what the fuck are we talking about? Board of Supervisors hearing the report first day Tuesday. Who cares? Several supervisors said they were surprised to hear pushback from politically liberal San Franciscan, apparently unaware that the legacy of slavery and racist policies continues to keep Black Americans, whoa, crazy. Yeah. Those are my constituents who lost their minds about this proposal. It's not something we're doing or we would do for other people. It's something we would do for our future or for our future, for everybody's collective future. Supervisor don't care. Draft reparations plan released in December is unmatched. Committee hasn't done an analysis of the cost of the proposals, but critics have slammed which leans conservative. An estimate from Stanford University, which leans conservative, has said the costs for each non-Black family in the city has said it would cost each non-Black family in the city at least $600,000. Keep in mind that doesn't mean that they're going to lose $600,000. It's that that's where the tax dollars would go. Tuesday's unanimous expressions of support for reparations by the board does not mean all recommendations will ultimately be adopted as the body. Right, so it hasn't passed. Some supervisors said previously that the city can't afford any major reparations payments right now, given its deep deficit amid a tech industry downturn. Tinish Hollins, Vice Chair, African American Reparations Advisory Committee, alluded comments, don't need to impress upon the fact that we're still setting national precedent here. Okay, cool. The idea of paying compensation for slavery has gained traction. Cool. In San Francisco, Black residents once made up more than 13% of the city's population, but more than 50 years later, they account for less than 6%. 38%, and 30% of it's homeless. Oh, geez. Shocking there. Fillmore District once thrived. Okay. Fewer than 50,000 still live in the city, and it's not clear. Okay. Critics say, okay. Advocates say the view ignores wealth, data, and historical evidence showing the long U.S. officials ended the 1865 government policies and practices work to imprison black people higher rates. Da 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 da. Yeah. So, yeah, it hasn't passed. It's a recommendation. And that's pretty much it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, not nearly as crazy as even I remember it being. Chicago suburb east became not only that, but if you if 6% of your population now has a lot of money to spend, that actually is going to improve your economy actually a little bit. Let's see, it has been taken up at the federal level. Okay. It's a thing that has not happened yet and probably won't ever, but okay, let's freak out about it.
During that segment, I expanded on a counterpoint. A counterpoint to reparations that had been made by
hit me with the ed poll.
Professor named Wilford Riley.
Yep. Put a black person in front of you to. Why didn't you just say Candace said it? If you're going to hold a black person up in front of you, to
incoherent because they rest on the speculative notion that descendants of slaves are in a worse place today than they otherwise would have been if their ancestors were never enslaved.
Yes. Oh, I love this. So what you're telling me is that black people who were sold to plantation owners through the transatlantic slave trade we're not sure if they would have been better off if they just immigrated here. Maybe they're better off that they were property. Maybe being property was better. Did we ever think about that? Okay.
Now, if this speculation is not accurate, if they are not in a worse spot, then there's nothing to repair. Nothing to repair for them anyway. Certainly we know that the slaves suffered greatly, but the slaves are all dead. So the reparations don't go to them, but rather go to people who, again, never experienced slavery. And so we must ask,
the ancestors of slavery.
They are concerned. According to this argument, which I find compelling and interesting,
naturally,
the more plausible speculation is...
let's be clear here. Matt Walsh has never heard a conservative argument spoken by a black person that he didn't like.
That, in fact, the ancestors of slaves are in a better spot today, not worse, because of slavery. This doesn't justify slavery or make it okay. Compelling and interesting.
Say that again?
The more plausible speculation is that...
The more plausible. Keep in mind, he's saying this is more likely. This is the more correct interpretation.
In fact, the ancestors of slaves are in a better spot today, not worse, because of slavery. This doesn't justify slavery or make it okay, obviously.
It just means
calls into question the basic logic behind allowing a group to literally cash in on historical atrocities. That's the point. And in an incredible...
So what you're telling me is it was okay. That's what you're saying. You are justifying slavery. You are saying that the results of slavery, i.e. these people now living in this country 100 years later, they didn't choose to live here. Their ancestors didn't choose to live here. But hey, it worked out in the end, to which... Did it? And also, is there a value to people being able to choose where they go, where they reside, where they live, where their families set down roots? Is that a value that we value here in the United States? Do you think if we took Matt Walsh and his family and forcibly moved them into South Central Los Angeles, and I don't know, maybe 100 years later, his family's still living in South Central. They have a small home. They didn't die, but maybe they're living in a nice city, I guess. They seem to work out okay. That's the argument. That's the idiotic argument he's making right now. that the forcible movement of not just people, but their ancestors inevitably was okay. That was, well, you ended up, it's fine for you. It worked out. It worked itself out in the end. That's the argument he's overall making. That, slavery is bad, sure, but it all worked out in the end, which I don't know if you can start from that premise.
Incredibly surprising
without being
people are
pretty amenable to slavery.
This point. And this came as a great shock to me personally, as I'm a people pleaser who always tries to avoid controversy and conflict whenever I can. But it found me this time, maybe for the first time, starting as always with the requisite Media Matters clip.
Oh, yes. I love how much he loves Media Matters.
10-minute monologue. Did not provide any context. Didn't even clarify that this was a conversation about reparations specifically. And they posted the clip, which then went viral. Now, for reference, we'll play the actual video they posted so that you understand where we are, what we're talking about for the rest of the conversation, which again is just one small sliver of a much longer monologue where I flesh out all these points and also explain why I'm making the points and what the overall point is. But Media Matters never bothers with silly things like context, and they also know that the drooling hordes who get worked up by out-of-context clips also aren't going to stop to wonder about
those darn clip chimpers.
So with that in mind,
understand, like Matt Walsh leans into this because most conservative pundits have utterly hated Media Matters over the pretty much inception of their organization, mainly because they mostly repost and simply kind of contextualize the stuff that conservatives say that might fly under the radar and kind of tries to signal boost a lot of the worst takes that they have. They're a media organization.
In fact, it seems rather clear that Black Americans are doing better here today than they would be had their ancestors generations ago never been brought to these shores. We can prove this point by simply asking which African country anyone asking for reparations would prefer to live in. The answer, of course, is none of them.
Wait. Whoa. Go back. Wait a minute.
Had their ancestors generations ago never been brought to these shores.
Okay.
We can prove this point by simply asking which African country anyone asking for reparations would prefer to live in.
Which country a person wanting to receive reparations in Africa. So you're telling me that we know that African Americans here in the United States are doing better because they would not freely choose to be respawned suddenly into a African nation for which they identify with very few of the customs, certainly not the language, nor the culture, the climate, the any of this stuff. What is this? What? Yeah, no shit. If you asked me, Josh, you complain about the United States all the time and about how our structures and systems aren't functioning properly. Why don't you? This is, and let's be honest here. I say that and I just thought of it. This is just the go back to your country then argument. That's all this is. This is the, if you don't like it here, go back to your country. Never mind that I don't speak Spanish. I don't know any of the customs in Paraguay. I don't know any of the people there. I don't have relatives. I don't have family. I don't have any roots there. Now, I was adopted. I have roots here in the United States, and I'm happy for those. But none of the, no black person in the United States, I shouldn't say no, but most black people in the United States do not have roots, modern, contemporary roots to Africa. They just don't. They have heritage, and there is an awareness of African culture, African identity, but there is no, they wouldn't take that to begin with. Regardless, in or outside of the conversation of reparations, you're basically asking them, well, you want reparations so bad, then go back to the country in which your ancestors were stolen from, and everything will be all good. What? I don't speak the language, idiot. Like, what is this? What is this? Oh wow, that's fucking stupid.
The answer, of course, is none of them. Now, you might offer the rebuttal that if slavery never existed, if we're reimagining history without that institution at all, then Africa itself would be in a better shape, better place, and better shape, and maybe indeed Black Americans would be better off there. But this...
Matt, do you think that the selling off of people on a continent could have led to the slower developmental progress on that continent? Do you think that could be part of it? I don't think Matt does, which, I mean, I don't know. He has to, right? He has to know that he sounds utterly brain broken when he says this, right? Like, he has to know.
Seems highly unlikely, and it also ignores the fact that Africans participated in slavery.
Oh boy, it seems highly unlikely. Let's go back to that really quickly so we can get a...
It never existed. If we're reimagining history without that institution at all, then...
Keep in mind, he's saying, if we imagine a world where the transatlantic slave trade did not impact Africa to the extent that it did, we can't say that there would be no slavery at all. Slavery was a multi-continental project. But keep in mind, there is an element, when we're talking about the United States, a specific relationship between African countries and the United States in terms of the slave trade. But he's setting this up as, imagine if slavery was not a problem in Africa. If Africa was left to its own devices, to its own isolation, to develop and grow as a continent.
And Africa itself would be in a better shape, better place, and better shape, and maybe indeed Black Americans would be better off there. But this seems highly unlikely, and it also...
Highly unlikely. In a world, in a hypothetical world, where slavery is not as effective on the African populace during the transatlantic slave trade and everything else, Matt Walsh still believes that even in the absence of slavery, Africa still wouldn't be better. Would you like to know why he thinks that? I think you know. It's because he doesn't think Black people are as smart. He doesn't think Black people are as intuitive. He doesn't think Black people are as creative. He doesn't think Black people are, and I mean this, in every way as equal, as interesting of human beings as whatever the fuck Matt Walsh is. He's a white guy, obviously, but I don't know if he's what his ancestry is. But this is just a racist argument. Keep that in mind.
Also ignores the fact that Africans participated in slavery and the slave trade as much as they were victims of it. Not to mention, if we're reimagining the world without African slavery, then we have to also imagine it without all other forms of global slavery, since African slavery was merely one variety, one offshoot of this global institution.
Keep in mind, there wasn't warring nations and armies would take slaves as like in wartime, like when they would capture soldiers, they would take them as slaves, right, to work. But that's not what the transatlantic slave trade was. The transatlantic slave trade was an industry. Keep that in mind. This was not simply warring nations taking slaves because, they just conquered your land. This was a business. These were transactions. We have record keeping. There's a big difference between the rest of the world's participation in slavery and specifically the transatlantic slave trade. There's a huge difference between those. One was a consequence of war. The other was a consequence of the commodification of an entire nation. Keep in mind that during the slave trade, while the people of Africa were being commodified at the expense of a shit ton of people and at the benefit of a very small in that community, there were also the robbing of minerals, the robbing of resources by European forces. You know, we all know the explorer man with his fucking Jumanji looking ass hat heading into Africa to hunt the big elephants. Like, we all remember, we all know about this. You know, all of this, all of Africa was like almost any resource rich locality was drained of those resources by outside forces. You know, can you imagine if, you know, in Africa they were selling, you know, the precious gems, the oil, the everything else that you find on that continent, selling all of those things to the benefit of African societies, not to the benefit of business owners, of kings and queens, of all the rest of these things from Europe. All of the riches of Africa never went to Africa. All of the purchases, all of the all of the money, all of the everything went to European colonists, not to the people in that nation. And again, is it surprising that they're behind? Obviously not. All the resources got stripped. Fuck's sake.
And now we have totally, at that point, rewritten the history of the world in a way so dramatic that it's absolutely impossible to say which individuals today would end up worse or better in this alternate universe. I mean, if you go back in time and get rid of slavery from the entire world,
cool,
you have just, it's impossible to say what the world looks like right now.
Luckily, no one's arguing that. We're just, the argument is that there are reparations that need to be paid to some of these communities. Luckily, nobody's arguing to build a time machine. I mean, I think it'd be cool. We build a time machine. We can go kill Hitler. We can go kill Mussolini. We can go kill, I don't know, I'm sure somebody else. Those are like the two big ones in my head at the moment. But yeah, like, you know, you can, you go kill a dude who created Jonestown. That's a good one too. Yeah, but yeah, we're not building a time machine, so I don't know what this argument is about.
Actually, what we can say is that we'd all end up worse. All of us today would be in a worse spot if slavery never existed at all across the entire globe.
Right.
Because a change that significant would likely shift the course of events in a way that would mean none of us would even exist. It would be a world full of other people who are not us.
Is this like a butterfly effect thing? You change one thing and the world shifts? I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm most likely indigenous more than anything. The transatlantic slave trade doesn't affect me. I mean, it certainly affected South America, but in terms of my birth, I don't know what that has to do with any of that.
So I know that I benefit today from virtually everything my ancestors did and everything did to them, because if any of that had not happened,
it's got to be nice
that I never would have come into being.
It's really, God, I'm stopping so much just because he's making so many dumb fucking points. Well, it's really nice. It's really nice, Matt Walsh, that you get to add the whole part of, you kind of slipped in the did to them, because in your mind, nobody did anything to your ancestors. The way you see it, your ancestors conquered these lands and, ended up on top doing all this stuff. But there were other people who they conquered, who they stole from. So, it's really easy to feel righteous when you haven't done anything to actually earn any of that.
And as I see it, I benefit from being if the other option is not being. Well, you can already imagine the reaction, so we don't need to read through very many of these, but here are a few people of the thousands who expressed their outrage at a point that it goes without saying none of them even attempted to refute. Heath Mayo, a man who calls himself a...
I love how they always cut out the likes and everything else, and they just bring up rando Twitter users that, either make the dumbest points or don't make strong arguments. I love that. I love when they pick their opponents.
Christian conservative, and who also happens to look exactly like his name, for the record, tweeted, "This is Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire, and increasingly, you're just a bad person if you support this know-nothing filth with your subscription dollars." Bernice King, the daughter of Martin Luther King Jr., responded, and here it is. One of the reasons why some don't want the horrors of slavery taught in schools, because they don't see it, or Jim Crow, as an atrocity.
Yeah,
but a grotesque statement, an egregious insult to the countless Africans who perished in the Atlantic or were enslaved here.
And again, Matt's not going to really touch on it. He's just going to say, well, I don't think slavery is wrong, but I mean, America wouldn't be in the place that it's in if we didn't have all this free labor. To which I have to ask, Matt, if you believe that we owe a lot of where we are as a society in terms of our progress and our place in the world to slavery and to the ability to cultivate free labor, if you think it was a positive force in getting us to where we are right now, don't you think you owe those people? Like, you've kind of made the opposite argument, my friend. You've said, hey, we've made it so far, and I'm thankful for what my ancestors did and enslaving your ancestors because it got me to the place where I can be a Daily Wire propagandist and a theocratic fascist. That's, the arc of history bends towards justice. Am I right? Well, if you want to believe that, if you believe that, that you've made it to a certain point thanks to an institution that victimized people, do you think you owe those who were victimized? Do you? Because understand that this is the imagine, if you will, the Holocaust. Now, what if the Holocaust, World War II, all of it, didn't happen? Would the United States be the thriving superpower that it is today? I don't think so. Certainly it helped in our development post World War II that many other countries, industrious countries, were recovering from the war, and in that time frame we were able to establish our dominance on the world stage. Only now that there is global competition in many different markets have we seen that the United States wanes a little bit. We're still the global superpower, certainly the leader in terms of economics, but we have the rise of China since the end of World War II. The EU, Britain, and all them have built themselves back up. Japan has become a strong manufacturing hub. So the question really is, was the Holocaust good under this mindset? No? Was it just kind of, should people be proud of where they are? Because, there are Jews who fled Germany, fled Poland to come to America under duress. Was the Holocaust better for them? They come to America. America's better than Germany, most would say. Under this logic, under this kind of thinking, that's the only conclusion you'd be able to draw. That the Holocaust was fine, was, not all, it's just a fact of history. because the people who are affected now, they were never in concentration camps. But, you know, they live in America now and they're doing better than otherwise. And that person made a good point that, you know, Ben Shapiro lets this kind of shit on his platform. You know? Holocaust seemed to work out for a lot of Jewish people. A lot of Nazis will say. So, you know, they got Israel, they got their own state, you know, they got their own thing going. Maybe it was justifiable. You know? That's what Matt Walsh is arguing. Again, every time you hear arguments from these guys, just, I'm not going to say flip the scenario, but apply it to a different scenario. And you'll kind of see where you go, oh, I don't know about that now. That doesn't sound as good when you say it like that.
Of course, race hustling shill Roland Martin got his 2 cents in. This analysis by Matt Walsh is the dumbest you'll ever see. This idiot wants to opine about the condition of Africa, yet makes no mention of racist white colonialism. Hell, racist whites redrew the boundaries of Africa at the 1885 Berlin Conference. What a Wajahat Ali kept it simple. Pro-slavery, eh? Hell of a plot twist. A guy named Ryan McMakin
Is it a plot twist?
Walsh has been good on exposing the dumbness of the whole men can be women thing, but there are not words sufficient to describe how stupid this statement about slavery is.
Just a random
the argument
dude.
is the sort of arcane, trivial mental masturbation I would expect from a college freshman philosophy major. And given that his apparent point here is to basically say, stop saying slavery was so bad, it's a totally bizarre hill to die on.
Certainly
And
is.
there was also a lot of stuff like this. When Matt Walsh eventually dies a hopefully incredibly horrific, painful death,
True.
It'll be very cool watching people celebrate.
I will be in the streets.
With that last one, not the bit about hoping I die painfully. I prefer not to die painfully, but the second part. I know that many people will celebrate my death, and I take great pride in that. If I spent my life fighting,
Stop whining. Stop whining.
2 thoughts to be precise. First, predictably, everybody in the outrage mob accuses me of arguing that slavery wasn't bad, or that it wasn't an atrocity, or that it was actually good. I didn't say any of those things.
Matt. It's like you've never heard the word implication. It's always so lazy with. I will say that he's honest a lot of the times, but when he's not, he's just lazy because he just said I didn't say this exact word, these exact words, and it's always like, dude, can we move on from the. That's, you know, I didn't say this exact thing. Like, can we move on? I know you didn't say slavery was good. You just said that slavery resulted in some people ending up in a better place than they would have, which means there was a good outcome to slavery, which means you're defending slavery. You are advocating, you are giving space to the institution of slavery to be positive. You are trying to reframe slavery as a positive force in some people's lives.
I imply or suggest them. In fact, I refer to slavery as an atrocity in the very segment. Pitchfork Mob accuses me of holding the view that slavery wasn't bad. What they mean is that all I'm allowed to say about slavery.
You're allowed to say whatever. You have a giant YouTube channel and you don't get censored. Your videos don't get taken down. Stop bitching about what you're allowed and not allowed to say. I'm sorry. Did the police kick down Matt Walsh's door after that segment and arrest him? No. So shut the fuck up with this. I'm not allowed to say this. I'm not allowed to say that. Here's what you're actually not allowed to say. All of that without pushback. That's what these guys bitch about. Whenever anybody says, I'm not allowed to say X or Y, what they're actually saying is, I'm not allowed to say something without getting pushback. I would like people to stop arguing with me and just let me say whatever I want. But do you have a right to that? Do any of us have a right to not have someone disagree with them? No, they don't. So stop complaining about it. All conservatives, all Republicans, all you motherfuckers, because you're the motherfuckers that do this more than anybody else. All of you. Enough with the what I can and what I can't say bullshit. You all say it all the time. You all say the shit that you want to say. Nobody is arresting you. You're getting pushback. How about you come up with a fucking argument instead of complaining about the existence of a contrary take? God damn.
Is that it was bad. Okay? They want us to talk about slavery. They definitely want us to talk about it. They want us to harp on it. They want us to go on and on about it, just like they do.
No, I would just
But the
like
only
you to
thing
cover
we're
it in
ever
schools,
allowed
that's
to
all.
say is some variation of it was bad over and over and over again. If you try to move on to the next sentence, it was bad, end of sentence, and then continue and say something else about it. If you try to
Well, it kind of depends on what that is, doesn't it?
articulate some other thought, if you try to say anything else about it, you are automatically guilty of thinking that it's not bad.
Well, yeah, when you frame it
in other
in
words,
a
if
positive
it
light.
was bad isn't your only thought about slavery, then you don't have that thought about it at all. So either the only thing you think about slavery is
Well, actually, the case would be that if you spend 10 seconds, not even 10, if you spend 3 seconds saying slavery was bad, and the preceding 10 minutes talking about how slavery, the people who suffered under slavery and the ancestors of those people are in better places because the place that they were taken from was actually wasn't a developed nation and still isn't today, not because of slavery, but because they're black people and they aren't really as good at creating civilizations as we white people are. If you say all of that, then I say, oh, so you think it was good that their ancestors got enslaved and then came here and now they're Americans. That's what you're saying. Understand. That's what you're saying. You're saying that the alternative was, well, if they just stay in Africa, then they'd be poor, living in huts and living in the Resident Evil 5 villages. That's the alternative that he's set. Because he already said that it's unlikely that if all of the people who got sold into slavery stayed in Africa, that the country wouldn't develop. The alternative to his narrative, the alternative is, at the end of the day, to Matt Walsh, well, Africa's always going to be a poor, destitute country. At least we pulled you out, and now you get to be an American 200 years later after we enslaved your people, and also it wasn't your choice to come here. There's also that element.
Is that it was bad, or you think it was good? You're not allowed to have, you're only allowed to have one thought per topic. And this is how they treat slavery. It's how they treat every other subject.
They have
every subject.
When you say something that's racist, it's obvious.
And
you do get called a racist.
About it, yeah, go ahead and talk about it, but only just say that. Continue saying that over and over and over again. And this is what makes debate and dialogue on the national level totally impossible, not to mention incredibly
Has Matt Walsh
boring,
ever debated anybody? Like,
when we're all just
in real
repeating
life,
back to each other the stuff we already know and has long been established. How can we have a dialogue when you aren't allowed to develop your thoughts beyond, this was bad, very bad, it was so bad, it was so bad, it was the bad thing, it was a really bad thing?
Well, it depends. Are you starting from the premise that it was good, actually? Because if that's so, you can't really be mad when people say you're defending or advocating for slavery.
It wasn't always this way. As I mentioned, Dinesh D'Souza has been making a similar argument for years. In fact, here he is on NPR. NPR of all places, because this is the kind of thing you used to be able to say on NPR.
Dinesh D'Souza, yes.
22 years ago.
Fucking fuck ass.
Listen to what he says.
As a native of India, a country colonized by the British for centuries, and as a person of color living in the United States,
yes,
I cannot agree.
Let me use my. Again, do we notice? I'm going to skip over this because there's no point to this. He's going to say everything Matt Walsh has said, but he's going to do it with a brown face. That's it. That's all that's going to happen. All of Matt Walsh's argument in that entire bit is, this brown guy shares my opinion, meaning I'm allowed to. I'm racist, he's racist. He gets paid to be racist. I pay him to be racist. He now says what I say. I now have a way. I have a token to put in front of me, to trot out, to justify my entire position. That's all Dinesh D'Souza exists for. There is no other use for him as for Dinesh D'Souza as a human being to Matt Walsh or any other conservative figure, but to be a brown face to say the white supremacist things. That's it. That's it.
You could say that 22 years ago. Now it's the sort of thing that you'll only ever hear uttered on conservative media, and even there, most of the time, not. And if you do hear it, it's shocking. It's utterly shocking. Now, leftists, of course, disagreed, I would imagine, many of them did, with that at the time. But there wasn't any nuclear explosion of mindless outrage with a bunch of slobbering dummies screaming, "You support slavery! You think slavery is good!"
Because Dinesh is small fry.
People understood the point that he was making, because it is, at a minimum, valid and logical and thoughtful. It also
We're not going to go look at his points.
True.
And I'm going to say this now. It wasn't any of those things. It was stupid, vapid, and backed up by no actual facts. And with a pretty low understanding of the system of of slavery around the world.
But these days, thanks to social media, thanks to the increasing derangement of the left, thanks to plummeting IQ scores and all the rest of it, you cannot make valid
whose IQ's plummeting? Is it Republican voters or is it Democratic voters?
Beyond the one simple, shallow slogan that the left demands we all consign ourselves to. Second, you can somewhat understand the left's confusion here, I suppose. They firmly believe that the ends justify the means. Okay, it's one of the core beliefs of their ideology. The ends justify.
What? What are you talking about? What the fuck is he talking? The ends just okay.
Justify the means. So,
would you like to give an example?
When they hear this discussion, they assume that I'm making an ends justify the means argument.
Well,
because if they were making the argument, that's what they would be doing.
We're at 12:43. No, I'm not going to go back. We already know what he said. We're not going back.
If I'm saying that people today have benefited from historical atrocities, I must be saying that the atrocities were actually good and justified, because that's how they think.
But
that's not how I think. Okay, I think that there are no results that could ever retroactively justify an evil act. Let me give you an example. If I were to shoot you and send you to the hospital, and
did you ever wonder why this is the example he picks? Interesting he would pick such a violent example. Just curious.
Don't die. And while you're at the hospital, they, because they're doing all these tests and everything, they happen to discover, incidentally, that you have an aggressive form of cancer. And so they treat the cancer and you survive. My attempted murder does not retroactively become a form of medical treatment. Okay, it does not become. So, funny thing about that, Matt, the argument for reparations is that, did you catch me having a cancer? Which, by the way, the problem here, the problem with this is, and the reason why this analogy doesn't actually work, is because the people who are living, the ancestors of slavery right now, what is the in this analogy, what is the finding cancer part, right? What's the we found cancer? What would it be? That would be the what? The I don't even know. What's the good part? You live in America? That's not, you didn't get to choose that. Nobody gets to choose which country they're in. So that's not a meaningful that's not a meaningful choice that you got to make. It's not a meaningful outcome that you had some ability over. What's the we found cancer in this analogy? I genuinely couldn't know. When I started talking, I thought to myself, this doesn't really work, because reparations is arguing that, hey, you shot me, then they found cancer, which is all well and good, but you need to pay for the bullet wound that I'm now having to get excised out of me. And also there's like organs that were hit that you also need to pay for the upkeep of going forward.
Like, my spleen got ruptured. You need to cover my spleen getting ruptured, right? That would be the, if I went along with this argument, it would be the obvious, like, oh, so the person who shot you, if reparations are bad, not good, so the person who, so Matt Walsh shouldn't pay for your medical bills because he shot you? Should you thank Matt Walsh for, thank you for shooting me, Matt Walsh. Luckily, they were able to find this cancer. I really appreciate that. No, obviously not. You'd say, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck? You're paying for all of this. You're paying for my new spleen, my new everything. That, because you owe them that. You committed violence on them. And again, I fail to see what the finding cancer is. Because the problem with Matt Walsh's underlying logic is that living in Africa, that all the black people in the United States who are not, what's the word I'm looking for? Who are not products of immigration from Africa would have been worse. That's his argument. That we saved your future by bringing your ancestor here as property. We terrorized these people. We assaulted these people. We raped these people. And you get the privilege of not living in Africa, the place that we stole them from, and to this day is living with the consequences of that theft. Now you tell me, is that a pro-slavery position or is that an anti-slavery position?
Become good. Now, it's true that if I hadn't shot you, you never would have discovered your cancer, perhaps, and then, or maybe you would have discovered it too late. So paradoxically, me shooting you resulted in saving your life. But it was still an act of objective evil to shoot you. Okay? So that's the way that works. Now, here's the thing. If, expanding the analogy, if after having your cancer treated, you go on to have children, and then your children have children, and your children's children have children, and many years down the line, your descendants try to sue my descendants for the generational trauma.
Well, again, this is a very convenient analogy since bullet wounds are not transferable the same way generational wealth and development is. Notice that? Notice he picked something that can't really be transferred? People every day, black people in the United States, live with the results that live with the consequences of their families not being able to build generational wealth through slavery and through Jim Crow laws for the preceding 100 years after the Civil War. Whereas Matt Walsh tries to liken that to a bullet, something which can be removed almost immediately, not a long-term problem. You can't pass on a bullet wound. It's utterly brain dead.
Trauma caused by my assault against you. Well, if that were to happen, then in that case, it would suddenly become relevant to point out that these people claiming damages decades and decades removed from the incident probably wouldn't exist. Their entire family tree would be erased if not for the evil act that they are now trying to cash in on. That's the crux of it. Okay, the point that you have most likely benefited from historical evils becomes relevant when you attempt to quantify and monetize the trickle-down harm that you claim the historical evil has done to you.
Whoa. Well, the nice thing is we can actually prove that claim. You can make the claim of historical and generational consequences of slavery. We've already proved that. The question is, what do you do with that information? Do you address it, or is it just tough titties? I don't know what to tell you. Some people are the conquerors, some people are the conquered, which is a perspective that is, and let's be honest here, that's the real thing. That's the real position Matt Walsh holds, is that we won, you lost. I shouldn't have to care about that. We made it as far. We won, you lost. We made it far, you didn't. Deal with it, nerd. History is history. Fuck you. Thank you. Bye. That's the actual thing Matt Walsh cares about. It's because to Matt Walsh, he just thinks like, oh well, we made it. That's the only thing I give a fuck about. So no, you can get fucked. If we did it off the back of your ancestors, then guess what? That sounds like a skill issue. I wish he'd just be honest and just say that was his position. It'd be monstrous,
it's at that juncture that someone needs to make the obvious point. This thing that happened long ago was very, very bad. It was very bad for your ancestors. It is not, however, very bad for you. Yet you are the one claiming quantifiable and financial harm. The reparations demands are what makes this point especially relevant, but even without reparations, there's still value in acknowledging what we're talking about here and thinking about it. Yes, it is true that you likely would not be here today if history had not unfolded exactly as it did, right? The butterfly effect.
Oh, so it is just the butterfly effect.
All of it led to you.
All of it was worth it.
And to me. Rewrite history, and you will have written us out of the book completely.
Now, that's got to be really nice. As Matt Walsh sits in his $1 million studio with his shirt probably sourced from cotton from Africa, it's got to be really nice to sit here and say it's all been worth it when you're not in the community that was robbed, made products, thought of as products, as property, and then kept down for the preceding 100 years after you got your humanity reinstalled, which is nice, which was nice of people. It's got to be nice.
Aside from disqualifying any reparations demand, which I think it
always looks good from the top. Always looks like it was worth it from the top.
It simply means that we shouldn't live our lives obsessed with wrongs committed long ago, consumed by resentment over ancient sins. It doesn't mean those sins were not sins, okay? It doesn't mean that the wrongs were actually right. Mm-hmm. It just means that we should stop trying to make ourselves the victims of the very events that resulted in our existence.
Black people. Matt Walsh has moved on. Why can't you? Matt Walsh has forgiven him, believes forgive and forget, guys. Just let's move on.
Existence in the most prosperous and comfortable civilization in history, I might add. We should,
again, for the rich,
move on with our lives. The lives that we are blessed to be living. Because what else is there to do?
I don't know.
Just keep living in the moment, in today.
I don't know. We could create systems and structures that make people more equal and, offer equity to people who have historically, who we built built this country on the back of, and historically were never paid for any of that labor. Do you know how much free labor the South benefited from?
The outrage mob.
Stop it. No, stop. I want this page. There it is. How much free labor the South benefited from? Don't you think that's, don't you think they kind of owe the ancestors of that people all that free labor that they were able to build wealth on, and probably still today live off of that wealth, live off of the foundation built on that wealth? Just saying. But I think I'm going to start using this as a analogy more and more, since I was I finished the game not super long ago. But I want everyone to keep in mind that Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, all these sorts of guys, they have what I am going to term from now on as corpo brain, because that's what it is. To them, they are at the top of society. They have made it. They are, they are living. Here we go. This is what I want. They are living. Let's see if I can get, let's see. If I do this. Is this the frame? No, not this one. Where is it? No. I want one of the streets. What is streets? Come on. Give me what I'm looking for. Give me what I'm looking for. I'm looking for an aesthetic. Is this what I want? Yes, this is what I want. This is precisely what I want. Understand that there it is. That to Matt Walsh, it's all been worth it. Because Matt Walsh lives here. Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, all the rest of these guys who think, look, we all, the cards were dealt the way they were dealt. The world, unfolded the way that it unfolded. It couldn't have ever happened differently. And just because there are some people who, in our society are still in a maligned position, in terms of their wealth and class status, it doesn't mean we need to do anything. And it's because he lives in Corpo Plaza. Because this son of a bitch thinks it's all been worth it. All of it. All the slavery, all the wars, the Holocaust, all of it has been worth it. Because some people, specifically him, made it to Corpo Plaza. And for the rest of the world, for those communities that were robbed, that were stolen from, that were taken forcibly by people like Matt Walsh, they get stuck with this. They get overcrowded cities, pollution afoot, small apartments for the price of small homes. They get worse living conditions. If you're living in East Palestine, your water and your air has been polluted. And guess who doesn't live in those neighborhoods? Matt Walsh. Or any of the other neighborhoods that have toxic spills from train derailments in their neighborhoods. Keep in mind, this is the screed of an incredibly privileged and societally powerful person telling the downtrodden, the poor, and the maligned that it's all been worth it. Because if they didn't steal from your ancestors, you wouldn't even be rich anyway. You'd still be poor. That's his incredibly compelling argument. That black people would have never made it in Africa anyway. They would have never developed anything. So you might as well be happy with the pittance that we give you and allow you to create here in the United States, unless you are Candace Owens and you are willing to parrot our talking points, in which case then you can have $1 million. What an utter piece of shit. I will be dancing when the day comes. He will get the same treatment Rush Limbaugh got from me upon that day. The thing that they tell, like at the end of all YouTube videos where they tell you to click on one of these things to watch more videos. Yeah, I've been meaning to film one of those. So that's what I was doing. I was just setting it up to film one.